So the risks of offering buyer agent compensation are myriad. Now they can be mitigated against, and we'll talk about that in one of our other videos that are available for free at listingattorney.com. But in this one, we're going to talk about steering. We're going to talk about compromised fiduciary duty, artificially high commissions, and discrimination. And oddly, we'll knock number 4 out first. This is an interesting one. It was said by many commentators and maybe even realtors themselves and the realtor associations that if we don't broadcast uniform offers of buyer agent compensation on the MLS, in other words, one price to everyone, then there will be people discriminated against. There'll be minorities complaining. There'll be protected classes complaining that they're not being treated fairly because the seller can decide who gets offered buyer agent compensation and who doesn't, and that can incentivize certain groups and certain realtors to bring their clients and not others. So I think that risk is real. There are ways, maybe not mitigate against it perfectly, but there are ways to mitigate against it. And one of them is to broadcast buyer agent compensation ahead of time. Now that's completely legal. Even the lawyer for the California National Association of Realtors said so. It's just that realtors can't do it anymore. On my opinion, and I did it as a broker attorney, I know that when you set up all, marketing and you broadcast buyer agent compensations and saying, we're paying an extra 0.5%. You go to the broker caravan and say, if we get an offer in the next 30 days, we'll pay an extra 0.5% or extra percent. I know realtors would bring their very strong buyers to our property, hoping their buyers would like it. And sometimes they did, especially it was really a good strategy when your clients had fixed up a home and sort of over-improved it for the rest of the neighborhood. There were people who wanted to live in the neighborhood but could afford a better home, and that would be their home. And if you were incentivizing buyer's agents to come see the property, it happened. I can give myriad stories about that. I worked as a lawyer of counsel to a guy named Matt Jones who started favoriteagent.com. He did a whole book on the study in a subdivision in North Carolina where he showed that by offering 4% instead of 3%, his clients had higher selling prices. And the properties, they all comped out, obviously, because it was part of a subdivision. So offering buyer agent compensation can help sellers. Now, broadcasting it, so if you're saying everyone who brings a buyer here will get 2.5 or 3%, you're already setting expectations. Now, that doesn't mean your seller has to pay it. Like in a recent sale, my seller was okay with paying buyer agent compensation, but we had 9 offers. And eventually, people didn't want to really go over fair market value. They all kind of knew, not all, but many knew about where the property was worth. But as people were getting closer, they didn't really want to go over the number, but they were willing to start negotiating. The buyer's agents were like, well, if I lower my buyer agent compensation, can we get the deal? And I'm saying, well, make that offer. And then the next buyer's agent would call up and I'd tell them where we were and what the net was. And that if they wanted the property and they wanted to get their compensation that they were asking in their contract, I'd say, you're going to have to go over that price by about $15,000. And I could do that because I'm an attorney. Realtors aren't licensed to do that anymore. And part of it is because they're not attorneys. But part of it is because they can't mitigate against the risk. How are they going to mitigate against that risk? That was brought up by the realtors themselves. Now, let's go back to the top. Steering. Steering is built into this process. The buyer agent is being forced. Let's see if I brought that up here it is. I'll bring it over here. The buyer's agent is being forced to make their buyer sign this agreement where the buyer will write in 2.5 or 3%. Buyer agent commissions have gone up in 2025 according to Redfin because of practices like these. And they're saying, let's say as I've said before, the buyer's like, I don't want to pay $30,000 to buy this home. I can use that as a down payment. They're saying, don't worry, we'll get the seller to pay. So, normally a buyer might pay, a lawyer $2,000 or $3,000, maybe up to $5,000 to help them purchase a home direct from the listing agent. And maybe the buyer's agent is entitled a little bit more than that because they're taking buyers around in the cars. I would think $10,000 would be a lot. But because of these forms and this process, and because the Realtor Association's made a rule that says the buyer has to agree to the compensation amount even before seeing the property, and then they have forms that allow the buyer to ask the seller to pay, buyer agent commissions are being kept up high. So let me just, but that's going to cover really all of these issues. But let me just bring up an amazing thing about the steering. And I've discussed it in previous videos. So this box G3 is checked. This whole contract's already here. Like a seller could go, we're only going to pay $2,000. We counter box G3 to $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000. And purchase price is the same. Or, they can do what they want with purchase price. Why aren't they doing it? They've already got a contract. This is so different than before when buyer agent commission was part of the listing agent's commissions and put on the MLS. Sometimes the buyers are calling them and saying, is the seller amenable to buyer agent compensation? But sometimes they're just producing offers. The seller has an offer in hand. Why would they agree to pay 2.5 or 3%? And it's because the buyers are locked into this form. The listing agents know that, and the buyers might have to walk if you counter that. So I mean, the steering, the sellers are absolutely going to be steered away from properties that don't offer sufficient compensation to cover the buyer's agent's fees. That's built into this, right? And steering can be unethical and it can be illegal. And the DOJ has spoken on that subject in the class action suits and other places. So now let's talk about compromised fiduciary duty. This one's two parts. Let's see if I put all the stuff into the Google Notebook and I asked it to make a mind map. So let's see if it did. Yes. One of them, risk, is just when you're paying for a third-party fee, like I'm speaking to lawyers probably a lot here who refer clients to listing agents. If you're going to be someone else's, if you're going to be the lawyer for, let's say, a 20-year-old, and the parents are paying you, you have a retainer agreement that explains to the parents, yes, you're paying us, but my duties are still to my client, and I can't let you interfere with our strategies and everything else. Like, you'll allow a third party to pay, some of you will, but you'll make sure it's very strictly understood, and your influence, you will have already been paid. You'll have taken the retainer. It's already in. It shouldn't be really influencing the way you work for your client. Now, in a real estate purchase and sale agreement, and you'll even note in some of the class action suits, they're having sort of a party who has the opposite intentions that the buyer has, because the seller wants to get the prices up and make as much money as they can, and a buyer would like to get the property as cheaply as they can. So you're having the person on the other side pay for the buyer's agent commissions. And if they do it right, and I would certainly train, you've seen in this series, I've trained sellers and attorneys particularly, because listing agents can't do it, how to do it right. And that would be to bifurcate the process, make the buyer agent work for their commissions, as opposed to the forms where it's like a foregone conclusion and the listing agent can't even counter. I'm saying as lawyers need to be in there and make the buyer's agent work and negotiate and make it part of a separate contract. So now there is an issue. Just the duty of loyalty. Buyers have complained. I didn't realize the seller was paying my buyer's agent. That would compromise them. And on the flip side, in some of the cases, the sellers were like, why am I paying my agent who's then giving his money to pay for the buyer's agent who's going to try to help him pay less for my home? Like, this is a problem from both sides. Can it be mitigated against with education? Yes. With forms? Yes. But there's just a conflict right there in the beginning. And then the other thing is in the Nosalik versus Massachusetts PIN, I think it's MLS PIN, in that memorandum, which anybody who really is concerned about this should read, because it addresses a lot of the issues, and the follow-up memo too. In that one, the DOJ stated in one of the paragraphs, and the buyers would be interested to know that their agent isn't being incentivized to have them pay more for the property. That's a paraphrase, but it's pretty close. Point being that when you're paying a buyer's agent a % fee, and let's say it's a multiple offer situation, and they advise their buyer to pay $100,000 more, even though maybe 20 or 30 would have got the job done, but buyer's agents will frequently be in the dark, whereas the clients, the listing agents, wouldn't be. So the buyer's agent is already in a compromised position. Now they're saying, well, if we go up 100,000, we'll probably win. They've already done a lot of work. They want to get paid. Oh, and the other thing is, I'll make $3,000 more. Like, the buyers, the DOJ is saying, like, that's not a good way to do it. And again, I think you still can do it, But you have to mitigate against those risks. And then that risk can be very easily mitigated for the seller. But you can also see how this is like a slam dunk winning case for a plaintiff's lawyer. You paid a percentage commission to my buyer's agent? I mean, the DOJ's told you risk compromising the fiduciary duty of the buyer's agent when you're paying them. What did you do to protect yourself? What did the buyer know? I mean, that's an easy one, in my opinion, to mitigate against, but it should be. Now, yeah, okay, so we covered some of that. Let's see what we do for now this is, wow, we're already, unfortunately, there's another long video. But we're going to get to it. Let's see if it got it. Supported DOJ screening, class action ruling, structural deficiency. No, let's just skip that. I don't feel like trying to explain that because I had an AI. I had this mind map being made, and there was obviously the class action suits, and the DOJ agreed. And okay, I'll do it. It'll take a second. So what you have to understand is that the Broker Compensation Advisory, the California Association of Realtors have told us here they've removed all forms related to buyer agent compensation. They said it was I'll use their quote, cooperating broker compensation, but that is buyer agent compensation. Now it's different because in the past it originated from the listing agent. It was their money. Now it's a third-party contract. But that is the buyer agent compensation, and they've removed all forms. And I'm a realtor. I didn't find any forms in the database that would help a listing agent with respect to negotiating buyer agent compensation. They've been removed. In the other videos, I've also explained, if you understand the SIPR case and what the DRE tells agents, they can all, and my broker training, realtors can't even cross out words in a form. They can't create legal binding words. All they can really do is like fill in facts, prices, dates. That's it. They can't draft language. So you understand the listing agent's incapacitated, right, to counter. And the counter is part of, it's right in here. The request for buyer agent compensation is built into this form. And it's interesting that the California Association of Realtors has both listing agents and buyer's agents working underneath them. So you wonder what this clause is even doing in this form if a listing agent can't respond to it. But anyway, there it is. So now they've also made the buyer agent have the buyer agree to their payment at the weakest point in time for the buyer before they even go see properties. And they found a way for the agents to be able to say, well, don't worry, we'll get the seller to pay for it so they can keep their compensation high. So you see this process already has a built-in high commission mechanism. So again, buyers, class action lawyers, this is going to be a field day for them. And I really think that if this information is seen by the CAR's lawyers, I think we're going to see that they're going to have to come out. They're going to want to keep buyer agent commissions high, so they're not going to change that part of the process. They just need to have a disclosure that it's not going to be comfortable for the listing agents, but it's going to have to say you need to speak with an attorney before you sign this listing agreement. So you can decide if you're going to leverage buyer agent compensation, if you're going to offer buyer agent compensation, and you can go over the ways that you'll consider mitigating the risks of paying buyer agent compensation. And then we'll structure our marketing around that. It's too late. It's kind of too late to wait until buyers have already seen the property and making offers. So those are, so there, I think okay, so, and I pretty much just explained that. So that's really the video. Thank you. My name is John McConnin. I'm a broker and attorney. This series is free at listingattorney.com. You'll see this video and the others. Soon, I'll be getting to the point where I'm going to be explaining to attorneys that the future of real estate is a hybrid of listing attorney or an attorney who knows real estate and a listing agent. And the listing agent is going to have to be sharing their fees with the listing attorney. Now, I'll explain, if you work with me, I'm a listing attorney and a broker. I have a mechanism where we'll be able to help you get paid anywhere in the state, even if I'm not, I'm in San Diego, but and it might be hard to get $6,000 to $10,000 or more on a closing doc on a HUD if there's lenders, but I have a process that's legally compliant with the Bar Association and with RESPA, because you'll be doing the work and it's very high value work, and therefore you'll be entitled to get paid. And I have that process. That will be available at listingattorney.com. I don't even have, I realize now, it's a new website. It's a new channel. I've had videos on YouTube for San Diego real estate attorney since I was one of the first people there back in the short sale days, 14, 15 years ago. But I started this new channel to focus on this. But at listingattorney.com, you'll see the free video series, and it helps attorneys and sellers understand what the limitations are of listing agents. Thank you.